1. This happened when I worked in retail around 2005. I was 15. I was working at a very small grocery store, and although it was a small store, we were always busy, and it was near a popular beach and along a highway rest area. The night before, I had worked from 12 a.m. to 6 a.m., packing shelves. There was a huge delivery coming in that had to be stocked for the next day. I was offered double-time pay for the shift, so I jumped at a chance to work it. At 12 p.m. that afternoon, 6 hours after finishing the packing shift and barely getting 5 hours of sleep, I got a call from the assistant manager, Fran, who wanted me to come in to work a late shift. I explained that I just finished a shift and only had a few hours sleep. But the other girl called in sick and you're the closest person. I lived in the motel next door. My family were managing the motel at this point. I was too naive to know that I legally didn't have to come in, and I should have been paid overtime for working back-to-back shifts. Fine, but I'm working on 5 hours sleep, so don't expect me to do much. I got dressed and walked like a zombie to the store. When I arrived, we were extremely quiet with the occasional customer every 10 minutes or so. I was surprised she called me in at all, considering that even on a busy day, one person can run the store on their own. At around 2 p.m., Fran comes to me and says, "I'm going on my break. Will you clean the store while I'm gone?" I, picking up a duster, knelt down on my knees and proceeded to dust underneath the shelves. It had been thoroughly cleaned during the 6-hour packing shift I'd done a few hours ago, so it didn't need mopped. "No, not like that. You need to get under the shelf to clean it." "Why can't you do it? I'm exhausted, and I'm doing my best not to fall asleep on the spot." I'd informed her that I'd done the midnight packing shift. "You have to do it. I have a bad back." Fran then proceeded to grab the duster and lean down against OH&S bending guidelines and dusted underneath the shelf to demonstrate, making it look easier for someone who claimed to have a bad back. "I'm going on my 15-minute break, and by the time I get back, I want the floor to be spotless. Don't do anything else." Absolutely spotless. Gotcha. It was 2:02 p.m. at this point, and I knew that any minute now there would be a tour bus arriving. It arrived around 2 p.m. every day. Cue the malicious compliance. I started cleaning under every shelf and every display like my life depended on it. And a few minutes after Fran had left, customers began to trickle in. But I was under strict instructions to only clean under the shelves. Customers began to queue at the register. This was before there were self-serve registers. "Hello, are you working? Can I get some service, please?" "I'm so sorry, sir." I'm bringing out my innocent puppy dog eyes and red tear-dusted eyes from lack of sleep. "I was told I had to clean the floors and I wasn't allowed to do anything else. I really don't want to lose my job." The customers stormed out of the store and a few minutes later came back with Fran in tow. She had been outside smoking. The customer addresses Fran. "This poor young lady is in tears because you threatened her job. Fran, you have to stop doing this to your staff. Frank," the manager who was in charge of Fran, "will be hearing about this." "I told you I was working 5 hours sleep after working all night with Frank packing shelves. I'm going home to sleep. I believe you have some customers that need serving." I was so tired and angry that I didn't care if I was fired, so I went home and slept for most of the afternoon. It turned out that customer was one of Frank's close friends and was the driver of the tour bus that arrived every day. I turned up to work my regular shift the next day and explained to Frank everything that had happened and how Fran had treated me. He told me to go back to work and he would take care of it. Fran got a harsh talking to about her behavior and conduct in the workplace and was let go. This was her final warning, as she had been doing this for months to other staff members. Assistant managers don't have as much power as they think they do. Oh, and her bad back? She didn't have any back issues. She just used this as an excuse not to have to do anything at work. I never saw Fran in work uniform after that, but she did come in from time to time to buy groceries. We were the only grocery store in the area, apart from a takeaway shop. I'd always give the same "Hi, welcome, how are you today?" with the biggest grin on my face. Boy, that was sweet. 2. I had recently moved into a house with 2 other girls. It wasn't the best house, but seemed to look okay for a college apartment. One of the girls had a friend who had lived there before and told us that the landlord was sexist and kind of a dick, but usually meant well, and it was decent rent. I'll be referring to him as dumbass landlord. We were all broke, so we decided to sign a lease. I should have realized the warning signs when he wanted us to sign it in a Big Boys after he had just eaten dinner there, and the leasing agreement looking like he chopped it from other pictures of lease agreements on Google. We also found his apartment as an ad off of Craigslist. Things were fine for a few months. I was living alone until the next school year would start and wasn't home all the time, since I would go over to my boyfriend's a lot and sleep over. It was a split house with an apartment in the basement and ours on the first floor. It wasn't long until I started to notice things happening. We'd get a good amount of rain since we were in the Midwest, by some big local lakes, and it was springtime. We'd get a good amount of water, and the concrete steps to the house would consistently fill up with water I had to jump over, and it would disappear overnight. It also started to get a little bit of a musty smell in the house, and I started coughing and sneezing all the time, but didn't know why. Soon the other girls moved in and started having some difficulties with dumbass landlord. He wouldn't tell us when he'd come over to check on the property. He said he did this to keep up on looks and mow the lawn, but he did it way too often for any of us to be okay with. He would argue with us about having a copy of our own lease. He'd yell at us to give him rent payments in cash, especially before going up to his cabin north with his girlfriend. But the biggest of all was that we were having problems with mold, and he did not care. For a while, we hadn't talked to the people in the basement apartment, until everyone started having problems with him. We'd hear them arguing and yelling down below as often as we would upstairs. But they were in a hellhole. Everything they owned had mold growing on it. They had bugs everywhere, earwigs, beetles, ants, you name it. They were constantly throwing away their clothes, dishes, furniture, even their college papers and homework, since it was all growing mold. They spent money on plastic bins to hold most of their important items, but even those would get moldy. We also found out they were supposed to have another roommate down below, but she couldn't live there from her allergies to mold after signing a lease agreement. We also found out he verbally abused her and her mother on the phone to the point where they were crying, and she couldn't get out of the lease. She ended up paying for 2 places every month so that she didn't have to live there, because he wouldn't let her break the lease and didn't care. Upstairs wasn't as bad as the basement, but it wasn't good either. All of us were coughing more and more each month. We would wake up coughing in the middle of the night and were getting really sick. We tried to air out the house as best we could, but nothing helped. I ended up getting a severe case of strep throat so bad that every swallow I took made my eyes water, and made me verbally make noise from the pain. I tried to ask the doctor that I went to if he could prove that this was from mold later, but he unfortunately couldn't give me a solid statement on it. Me, being a vocal, neutral, good person who was also going to school to be an architect, tried to explain to him what was going on in the house. No air circulation, his concrete steps and foundation walls were not sealed, so all of the water I'd have to jump over was most likely going into the basement walls, causing most of the mold. We also found a few areas of the roof that needed patching since we noticed some leaks among other things. And the basement apartment had cheap patio doors for their only means of entrance and exit, which would consistently be up against water when it rained, adding to the problem. Oh, smart dumbass landlord decided that we were all just girls complaining about silly things that didn't mean anything. So he brushed us off, and said we were fine even though I had told him that I was learning about these things in school, and knew what I was talking about. He wouldn't let any of us out of the lease as hard as we tried. So all of us girls in both apartments decided we would get out if it was the last thing we did. Then began researching all of the legal apartment and tenant information for our state and city to get out. We were paying for attorney fees, started taking pictures of the mold upstairs and downstairs that we could find, talking with several different city staff and police, and started compiling this into a nice document. After deferring my rent payment to get a copy of the lease from him, we could finally take a look at our legal document and use that further to get out. We were also working with another landlord at a renting company in town, who I will call Good-Ass Landlord. He was thankfully doing his best to get us out of the hole and into his apartment. Through him we'd get all of the legal ins and outs of the renting business, and he would help us find a loophole. Then, after months and months of arguments, money, and researching, we found it. If we sent in a mold test to a research lab and it was over the limit of what was inhabitable, we could get out. It was safe to say we had a pretty good idea this was over the limit. The test came back a few days later and we sent that off to the city, including our nice document of pictures, statements, and leasing agreements. Not even 4 hours went by and we got a call from the city. Our house was so full of mold that we were to move out of that apartment within 24 hours, and it was to be condemned. We were ecstatic. All of that hard work had finally paid off, although it was horrifying to know that the mold count was so high. The mold researcher who had been in the business for more than 30 years had not seen a place with a higher mold count than this house. Yes, this included black mold. Fast forward to us happily packing up our house, all of our parents getting us out together, us moving into the apartment that good-ass landlord kept open for us to move into, and poor old DAL sobbing in our driveway as we happily stacked boxes into cars, complaining that he should have paid more attention and listened to us. This was his girlfriend's property and she's going to dump him. We all took a picture the next day, smiling in front of the condemned signs. It's still one of my favorite pictures to this day. Serves him right for not listening to his tenants. In the aftermath of it all, apparently this city knew about a lot of the shady things he did when we spoke to them. It seemed like he was an eye-roll landlord. They knew of other problems he had with tenants, but no one had been able to do anything about it until us. He'd sneak his way out of things, since it was a really small town. Unfortunately, there weren't a lot of rules in place for bad landlords unless they did something really illegal, which is why we had a really hard time getting out of there. Also, about a year or so later, I saw more college students living there again. We're pretty sure he did one of those at-home mold testing kits to get it up for sale again, or fought the city somehow. I don't know what he ended up renovating other than he ripped out a lot of carpet. I felt bad for those new people, just wished them the best and hoped they don't have as bad of an experience as we did. I wish it turned out different in the end, but I hope he learned his lesson to actually help his tenants when they need it. I don't hate the guy, but I think he has some things to work out for himself. You might also be wondering why we didn't sue. We could have, but it wasn't worth the money and time, since we were all graduating in a few months and broke from speaking with lawyers. We did see what we could do about it, though. We just decided that getting out of the house and cutting ties would be the best, instead of dragging the situation out further. 3. I worked at a small spa company. There was only about 6 workers there. I worked there for a year and a half and only met the owner once, but talked to them on the phone a lot. She was batshit crazy, but that's besides the point. Anyways, I got hired because my friend's mom, Pam, was the manager, and someone had quit in the middle of their shift, so they needed someone fast. I worked really well there and learned very fast. I was very good at the job to the point where after a couple of months, they sent new hires to be trained by me. Turnover there was bad. Despite this, I didn't get a raise or anything. It wasn't a big deal, but it would have been nice. Anyways, I was always a closer. There would be a list of things I had to do after we closed, like vacuum and dust and such, janitorial things. As months go by, Pam begins to pick apart things. A string was left on the rug, the candy bowls weren't filled, even though they weren't half gone, etc. Nothing too big. Slowly things started to get worse. Eventually I was being told that I was not cleaning rooms that I know for a fact I had. Now I admit that once in a while I would forget to clean something, but I was getting yelled at for things I knew for a fact I cleaned. My other problem was that my coworkers would forget the same exact things. She wouldn't yell at them, but would just say, "Try to remember," or something along those lines. Eventually Pam got other coworkers to lie so that she could report me to the owner. Many days I came from school and would be wearing my jeans. Pam left right when I got there, so after I clocked in and counted the drawer, I would go and change into my work pants. Well, it turns out other coworkers would lie and tell her I never changed. After this, I began taking pictures and timestamping them. This worked for a little while, but then my coworkers would say I changed back into jeans after that picture. And when it came to cleaning, she would say I didn't clean it well enough, etc. All of these would get turned into the owner, but she wouldn't fire me because they were so desperate for people no one wanted to work there. I wonder why. Eventually I quit because I had a job for the summer that gave me many more hours. In my summer job I made the same amount of money in 7 weeks that I made in a year at the last place. Right after I left, I learned why Pam wanted me gone so bad. Pam hired her son, my ex-friend, because he was too lazy to work a job where he couldn't sit around all day. That made me mad. But even worse, that they wouldn't give me my last payment. We were paid in cash. I sent multiple emails and text messages to Pam and the owner and reminded them that I needed it. When those went unanswered, I threatened legal action. Being a high schooler, I don't believe they thought I would do anything. How wrong they were. Well, there were many reasons I was mad. And so I decided I'd document every single thing about that place. These include 8+ hour workday with no breaks or a lunch, both of which are required in my state, rats in the basement, ant infestation, fake security cameras, allowing underage drinking, Pam faking the amount of money we had to pay her son and daughter for under-the-table work, child labor, Pam's daughter was not old enough to work, not fixing things like building framework, mold, etc., allowing temperatures to go above and below the legal limit. On bad days it was above 100 or below 50 inside. Drug use. Pam giving themselves a raise even though they already made more than everyone else there. Selling client information. Pam compiling clients for another worker to take with them to a new company. Usually not illegal, but the way they went about it was. I don't remember the exact details. Not doing anything but harassment. Not paying workers. There'd be days where we didn't have enough money in the drawer, and the owner and or Pam would be too lazy to go to the bank, so they would just straight up not pay us. Not only this, but prior to me leaving, I recorded some of the verbal abuse from Pam. Believe it or not, I even got them to admit making false write-ups on me. There was more, but I can't remember what else right now. Anyways, I compiled all of this and sent in an email to OSHA. Shit went down. In the end, both Pam and the owner were served with some hefty fines, and Pam is even facing jail time right now for fraud. The owner had to shut down their business and sell it. I don't know if the owner is facing any jail time. I also emailed every spa within 50 miles, so the owner, Pam, and some co-workers have been blacklisted from working within an hour of where we're located. I never did receive my last payment. It wasn't worth going to court over, but what came out of it was so much better. 4. This was back in high school in Denmark. We got a new teacher for social studies. Year 2. Among the first things she tells us about herself is that she hates swear words, really hates swear words. If she ever catches you swearing 3 times in one of her lessons, she would give you a 1,000-word essay for the next lesson. Now, I don't like swear words much either, but they are a natural part of speech. None of us ever got the threatened essay, though we didn't swear less, but it added so much stress to us, and the tally marks on the blackboard were humiliating. We all hated her from day one. After a couple of months, we had to analyze news articles and orally present them. There were a few categories, and we all had to do them in rotation. On the way home from Copenhagen to Odense on the train, reading the train magazine, I found an article. Cue my PettyRevenge. The article was about swearing and types of swear words, religious, sexual, medicinal, disguised swear words, the difference between swearing and strong language, how to use swearing productively and use it unproductively, etc. There was a month until I had the category that the article would fit into. I had to do 1 or 2 other articles before that one. I have never done my homework that early before or since. When the day finally came and I read out the title of my presentation, my teacher slammed her head down into the table with a light thud out of despair. It felt so good seeing that. It was like a movie scene. Out of common respect, I didn't swear at any point during my presentation, but I did describe the words thoroughly. I did my assignment, I didn't break her rules, so she couldn't do anything while I praised swearing. 5. Now, with this story, I would like to say that I had something to do with the sudden downfall in quality at my old store. But in all fairness, the manager kind of did this to herself. I used to work at a very popular coffee shop. We can call it Barstocks. This Barstocks is brand new to my town. It's only been around for a year now, and already it is becoming one of the worst places to go. It has a 3-star rating because of how awful the service is there. I started working there about 3 months after it had originally opened, and I quickly became one of the best baristas at the store. I was efficient with making the drinks, extremely friendly with the customers, and I was friends with literally everyone on the team, even my manager, who is the worst manager I've ever had the displeasure of working with, loved me, and thought I did an amazing job at the store. I struggle with depression and anxiety, and I had talked to my manager about keeping me away from the window. The window is basically where you take the orders in drive-thru and hand them their drinks when it's ready. You're not allowed to leave the window unless you're told, and usually you would spend the majority of your shift there. You're also supposed to talk to the customers until they get their drinks. You would get yelled at if you closed the window on a customer before their drinks were ready. Now, if I'm chilling for too long with nothing to do, my brain starts shutting down and throwing nasty thoughts in my face. This makes me extremely depressed and unresponsive even when I try to cheer myself up. She complied and left me on bar or support for most of my shifts. Now, at bar stocks there are usually 3 to 5 shift leads, many managers who run the shift when the manager isn't there. One shift lead, we will call Karen, decided that she didn't like that I got out of window duty, so if she saw I was working with her and she was shift lead for the day, she would put me in window. This led to a few instances where I became so depressed that by the end of my shift I was crying in the back room because of repressed memories being brought up or nasty and abusive thoughts coming to my head. This was made even worse because after every customer I encountered, Karen would berate me for not smiling and talking to customers. Karen and the manager, Mindy, are and have been best friends for years. So whenever Karen would see me struggling on window, she would go and tell Mindy that I was doing a terrible job and being rude to customers. Mindy decided to talk to me about it and blamed me for not being able to hold myself together, telling me that bar stocks helped her get through an abusive relationship, so I just needed to suck it up and get over it. Her exact words. After this, I made it my goal to never get put on window again. If I had a shift scheduled with Karen, I would ask someone to switch shifts with me, or ask to take up a shift in a different town so that I wouldn't have to deal with her. It worked for a while, and I only got put on window a few times after that, but with shift leaders who understood what I was going through, and who would allow me to help out my other co-workers whenever I could. One day I was on bar. It happened to be happy hour, but by this time we had already served over 500 customers. I had about 15 for pays to make, and with no help at all because Mindy didn't schedule enough people. This is important for later, and 2 of my favorite shift leads could see I was struggling. I don't blame them at all for what I did after this, and in fact I respect them so much more for how they handled the situation after I had left the floor. They just had the wrong timing for the situation. Both of them asked me to go to 2 different spots and try to give me a break from the bar. This made my already panicking brain go into immediate shutdown mode, and I quickly excused myself to the back room. I admit now that my actions weren't appropriate, but I was, at this point, having a major anxiety attack, so I couldn't control myself as much as I would have. I threw my headset on the floor, chipping it but not breaking it. I punched the door. It was metal, so nothing broke. Plus, it was loud in the store, so no customers could hear it. And I started sobbing hysterically on the floor. After the store calmed down a little, my absolute favorite shift lead, Kenzie, came into the room and comforted me. She saw my dad in the lobby and told me to talk to him for a bit. I apologized to the whole team later that day because I felt awful for how I had reacted. No one held it against me because most of them had anxiety or depression as well, so they understood. A day or 2 later, Mindy asked to speak to me, and she had the district manager with her. I was about to start my shift and had just walked into work when she told me that they, and I quote, "can't handle you anymore. You should try finding another store that can handle you," and that my termination would be permanent. I am not able to work for this company ever again. I spent the next, I kid you not, 3 weeks in the most depressed state I'd been in for a while. This was right before Thanksgiving, and I had just gotten the insurance I needed to start medically transitioning. I am transgender, female to male, and I almost had enough money to start taking testosterone. To make things worse, I genuinely enjoyed the job. It made me want to pursue coffee as a career, and the fact that I got fired permanently broke my heart. I was even more pissed off by how Mindy spoke to me when she was firing me. She sounded condescending, like she was the most powerful person in the room. Now for the revenge. A few months before I got fired was when things started to go downhill for our store. Mindy had decided that vacations to California, we live in Indiana, and Chicago and New York were far more important than running a store. So for about 2 weeks of every month, she would go on a business trip, only to show us vacation pictures of her kid and husband. She would fight with her husband in the lobby of our store with her child in front of customers. She would allow her child to stand on the counters we served food and drinks on, as well as run around the store like a wild animal. No shoes or shirt on, with only a diaper. She would constantly mess up our schedule. She would talk about other co-workers behind their backs. She would schedule co-workers to work in other towns even after they had said they can't and won't work in said towns. She even went as far as giving her manager tasks that only managers are allowed to do to the shift leads, because she didn't have time for them. These tasks include waste management, food management, money management, and a few others that I can't remember. She would then yell at the shift leads when everything wasn't done exactly like it needed to be, even though they weren't trained to do any of the extra tasks she put onto them. All of these things, combined with even more that she did that I won't bother you with, led to all of the staff disliking her and eventually hating her. After I got fired, that added more fuel to the already massive flame she made. Half of the store thought that she did this as a power move, and I can fire the most likable coworker I have, so that means I can fire all of you, sort of thing. When I finally managed to get myself back on my feet, my first course of action was to spread the word, starting with my family. I told everyone what happened. They've all stopped going entirely. I then moved on to other coffee shops in town, spreading the word that Mindy is a terrible manager who can't run a store, who fires teenagers for having anxiety attacks. Soon more and more people heard through my grapevine about what's been going on, and either don't go anymore or outwardly show their distaste for Mindy. Most of my old co-workers also quit because working there under Mindy's control wasn't worth the stress. This led to their numbers of staff to decrease exponentially. They've now become one of the most hated coffee shops in my town, due to the lack of staff and bad management. Most people who still go there wait upwards to 20 minutes for their drinks because there aren't enough people to keep up with their orders. They've even had to close the store a few times because they just didn't have enough people to work that day. Most days the line wraps all the way around the store and it almost bleeds into the street because no one is able to keep up with the amount of drinks being ordered. So even though I didn't necessarily end Mindy's career and shut her store down, well, I probably didn't even cause that big of a difference with sharing my sub-story to half of the town. I still like to believe that my loose lips spreading how horrible of a manager she is caused a chain of events to unfold. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Revenge is Ice Cream, number 48. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use and sent in stories for use in this video. If you have a story yourself you'd like to send in for use in a future video, be it Revenge is Ice Cream or Spinning Plates, True Scary Stories, whatever else I do, I'm going to be working on a new call centers video soon, and I'd like to get another Eagle Legals done at some point, so I'm going to start putting out feelers. Well, when am I going to start putting out feelers? Let's see. I've got Glitch to do this week. When that's done, I need a break. So what I'm going to do is, once the Glitch is done, I'm going to start working towards essentially doing the next 2 weeks' videos. I'll do the weeks early, then I'll try and get the second week's done. I think it should be okay for certain videos to do that, because I want to rest. I want to take a week off, and that's what we're going to do. But as always, I will not leave you without videos. That's not how I like to do things. I'll just work in advance. So you might find there's a few more recording streams as I try to pile the stories away so I can get everything recorded and then just edit and make and so on and so on. Oh yeah, before I got distracted, I was going to say if you have a story, send it along to kingofthecities@gmail.com. Distracted myself. Okay, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.